Sometimes, the bravest plea for mercy is not made to save a life, but to save the future. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe justice doesn't always ride with a gun, but sometimes with a single act of mercy, take a moment to like and follow. Now, back to the story. The desert held its breath beneath the fading light. Dust drifted across the cracked earth like ghosts that had forgotten where they belonged. The evening wind carried the dry scent of sage, old leather, and distant rain that would never reach this forgotten stretch of Arizona territory. Four horses stood in a loose circle. 4 armed cowboys. Their rifles remained lowered, but every pair of eyes rested on the young Apache woman kneeling in the sand. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging for her own life. Her long black hair, tangled with dust and dried blood, clung to her shoulders. One sleeve of her buckskin dress had been torn away, revealing bruises already turning dark beneath the last orange rays of sunset. Even exhausted, there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. One of the men spat into the dirt. "Finish it, Ethan." Another rested his thumb on the hammer of his revolver. "She's Apache. You know what they'll do if she gets away." Ethan Walker said nothing. He remained seated on his weathered bay horse, studying the woman below him. 42 years had carved hard lines across his face. His gray hat-shaded eyes that had watched too many funerals and too many men mistake hatred for justice. His coat carried the dust of countless miles, and the old cavalry revolver at his hip looked as though it had not been drawn in years. The silence stretched. The Apache woman slowly lifted her eyes. Not toward the rifles, toward Ethan. There was fear in them, but beneath the fear lived something stronger. Resolve. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely louder than the wind. "Kill me." The word surprised no one. "But save the child." Every man frowned. The youngest cowboy glanced around the empty desert. "What child?" She didn't answer. Instead, her trembling hand pointed toward a narrow canyon where the evening shadows had already swallowed the rocks. Only then did Ethan hear it. Not footsteps, not horses. A tiny cough. Soft, weak, hidden beneath the whispering wind. His gaze drifted toward the canyon entrance. Nothing moved. Only darkness. One of the cowboys laughed. "She's buying time." Another cocked his rifle. And this before more of her people show up. Still Ethan did not move. There was something wrong. Apache warriors never abandoned one of their own. Yet this young woman stood alone. No weapons. No horse. No attempt to escape. Only that strange request. "Save the child." The wind shifted again, this time carrying another sound. Not a cough. A frightened breath. Someone small was hiding among the rocks. Ethan slowly slid from his saddle. His boots settled into the dust with barely a sound. 3 rifles instantly followed his movement. "What are you doing?" one man barked. Without looking back, Ethan answered quietly, "If she's lying." He took another step toward the canyon. "I'll know soon enough." The Apache woman's shoulders finally trembled. Not with fear, with relief. Behind the broken stones, unseen by every man except the setting sun, a pair of frightened young eyes waited in silence. And before this night was over, Ethan Walker would discover that the child hidden inside that canyon carried a secret powerful enough to stop a war, or start one. The little cough came again, so faint that another man would have mistaken it for the wind slipping through broken stone. Ethan Walker never made that mistake. He had learned long ago that death was loud. Life fought quietly. He walked toward the canyon without rushing, every step deliberate, every sense awake. The evening light faded behind the cliffs, swallowing colors until the world became nothing more than shades of amber and shadow. His boots crushed loose gravel with slow, measured rhythm. Behind him, the 3 cowboys exchanged uneasy glances. "Damn it, Ethan," one shouted. "She's fooling you." He didn't answer. He had stopped arguing with angry men years ago. Most of them weren't listening anyway. 20 years earlier, Ethan might have reached for his revolver first. Back then he had. Believed every problem could be solved by drawing faster than the man across from him. The cavalry had rewarded that belief with medals. Life had rewarded it with graves. His wife, Sarah, had died during the fever epidemic while he was hundreds of miles away chasing men he could no longer remember. Their 7-year-old son, Benjamin, had followed 3 days later. When Ethan finally rode home, the cabin was silent. The rocking chair still moved in the wind. A small wooden horse lay beside the doorway where Benjamin had left it. No gun had ever felt heavier. From that morning on, Ethan stopped believing violence could protect the people who mattered. He sold nearly everything. He left the army. He disappeared into the frontier, buying a lonely cattle ranch where neighbors were measured in days rather than miles. People called him strange. Some called him broken. Others simply forgot he existed. Ethan preferred it that way. Silence never lied. As he reached the narrow mouth of the canyon, he crouched slowly. Fresh footprints. Small, bare feet. Beside them, larger tracks. Not Apache moccasins. Military boots. His eyes narrowed. Someone else had been here. Recently. A dry breeze carried the smell of smoke. Not campfire smoke. Black powder. His pulse slowed instead of quickening. Danger always became clearer when a man stopped fearing it. Ethan. The voice behind him sounded farther away now. They're coming. He ignored it. Another cough echoed between the rocks. This one closer. He rounded a weathered boulder, and time seemed to pause. A boy no older than 6 stared back at him. Thin shoulders. Dust-covered cheeks. Dark, frightened eyes far too old for his face. The child clutched a worn leather pouch against his chest with both hands as though it mattered more than food. More than water. Perhaps even more than life itself. He tried to stand. His legs gave way immediately. Ethan noticed the torn bandage wrapped around the boy's ankle. Fresh blood seeped through the cloth. The child instinctively pulled the pouch tighter. No. His English was hesitant. Don't take it. Ethan remained exactly where he was. He remembered another frightened child gripping a wooden toy horse years ago. Another pair of frightened eyes. Another chance he had failed to protect. Slowly, he removed his hat. Then, without saying a word, he set his revolver belt on the ground several feet away. The boy watched every movement. Only then did Ethan kneel. My name is Ethan. The child said nothing. I'm not here to hurt you. Silence. The wind sighed through the canyon walls. Finally, the little boy whispered just 4 words. They killed my father. Those words struck Ethan harder than any bullet ever had. Behind him, somewhere beyond the canyon entrance, horses suddenly began screaming. Not whinnying. Screaming. Then came the unmistakable sound of dozens of riders galloping across hard desert ground. Whoever had been hunting the Apache woman had finally arrived. The riders came out of the evening haze like shadows breaking loose from the mountains. There were 12 of them. No banners. No uniforms. Only dark coats coated in desert dust and rifles resting across their saddles with the confidence of men accustomed to killing before asking questions. Their horses were lathered with sweat. They had ridden hard. Very hard. Ethan stepped between the frightened boy and the narrow opening of the canyon. He did not reach for his revolver. He simply stood. The leader pulled his horse to a stop less than 20 feet away. A scar crossed the man's jaw from ear to chin, twisting his smile into something that looked almost painful. Evening, Walker. Ethan recognized him immediately. Silas Mercer. A bounty hunter who had learned long ago that dead witnesses were easier to collect than living criminals. I've got no business with you, Ethan replied. Mercer's eyes drifted past him toward the canyon. We're looking for a runaway Apache woman. Silence. And a boy. Another silence. They stole something that doesn't belong to them. Ethan's expression never changed. What did they steal? Mercer smiled. If you don't already know. He shrugged lightly. You're better off staying ignorant. The wind rolled between the cliffs. Behind Ethan, the little boy struggled to suppress another cough. Mercer's horse flicked its ears. The hunter heard it. His smile vanished. There. He pointed his rifle toward the canyon. I knew they couldn't have gone far. Every rifle around Ethan slowly lifted. Behind the rocks, the boy's breathing became quicker. Then, another voice. Stop. The Apache woman stumbled into view before anyone could react. She was barely able to stand. Blood stained the side of her dress where dried wounds had opened again. Yet she planted herself between the canyon entrance and the armed riders. Her hands remained empty. Her chin lifted proudly. No more running, she said quietly. I'll go. Mercer laughed. You don't get to bargain anymore, Aiyana. So that was her name. Aiyana. Ethan watched her closely. She never once looked at the rifles aimed toward her chest. Instead, her eyes searched only for the frightened child behind him. The boy shook his head violently. Sister. The single word carried more pain than tears ever could. Aiyana forced a smile that looked impossible beneath her exhaustion. It's all right. It isn't, the child whispered. Mercer grew impatient. Tie them both. Two riders swung from their saddles. They had taken barely 3 steps before Ethan moved. Not fast, not threatening, just enough to stand directly in their path. The 2 men stopped instinctively. Mercer frowned. You planning to die for Apaches now? Ethan looked at him with the same calm expression he had worn since sunset. I'm planning to understand why 12 armed men need to hunt 1 wounded woman and 1 injured child. Mercer's jaw tightened. You don't understand frontier business. I understand fear. The words settled over the canyon like gathering thunder. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Even the horses seemed to sense something changing. Mercer slowly dismounted. His boots landed softly in the dust. That boy, he said, is worth more than every ranch in this territory. Ethan glanced back. The child instinctively hugged the worn leather pouch against his chest. Not once had he loosened his grip. Whatever lay inside, it mattered as much as the boy himself. Mercer noticed Ethan's eyes. So you saw the pouch. A cruel smile returned to his scarred face. Funny thing. He took 1 slow step forward. Everyone thinks we're chasing the child. He paused, then spoke the sentence that froze every soul in the canyon. We couldn't care less about the boy. His finger pointed toward the weathered leather pouch. We only came for what's inside. The desert fell silent. Even the wind seemed unwilling to interrupt what would happen next. Ethan looked from the leather pouch to the frightened boy, then to Aiyana. Neither of them denied Mercer's words. That told him everything. Whatever rested inside that worn pouch was no ordinary possession. Mercer extended an open hand. Give it to me. The boy tightened his grip until his knuckles turned white. No. The answer barely rose above a whisper. Mercer's smile disappeared. I wasn't asking. One of his men stepped forward, drawing a long hunting knife instead of a pistol. Steel reflected the last strip of sunlight before darkness swallowed the blade. Behind Ethan, the boy instinctively took 1 step backward. His heel struck the canyon wall. There was nowhere left to run. Aiyana closed her eyes for only a moment. When she opened them again, fear had vanished. Only determination remained. She slowly reached beneath the collar of her buckskin dress and removed a thin leather cord from around her neck. Hanging from it was a small carved turquoise pendant. She walked toward Ethan. Mercer's rifle followed every step. So this is where the cowboy dies, one rider muttered. Ignoring them all, Aiyana stopped in front of Ethan. Without asking permission, she gently placed the pendant into his rough, weathered hand. Her fingers trembled. Not from fear, from exhaustion. My mother gave me this, she said softly. It belongs only to someone worthy of trust. Ethan looked down. The turquoise stone had been worn smooth by years of careful hands. Tiny symbols had been carved into its surface. He could not read them, but he understood their weight. You don't even know me, he said quietly. A faint smile crossed Aiyana's face. I know enough. Mercer laughed harshly. Touching. He cocked his rifle. But stories don't stop bullets. His men spread into a wide semicircle, cutting off every possible escape. The sun slipped below the horizon. Cold blue shadows filled the canyon. Ethan slowly wrapped his fingers around the pendant. Something inside him shifted. Not courage. That had never truly left him. Purpose. For years he had wandered through the frontier believing his life had already ended, leaving only his body to finish the journey. Now, a frightened child stood behind him. A wounded woman trusted him more than men she had known her entire life. He had not asked for that responsibility, but somehow it had found him. He lifted his eyes toward Mercer. If I hand over the pouch. Mercer's grin returned. We all walk away. No. The answer surprised everyone. Even Ethan himself. Mercer's face hardened. No. You lied. The bounty hunter frowned. You said you didn't care about the boy. I don't. But men willing to murder children for a leather pouch don't leave witnesses alive. For the first time that evening, Mercer's silence became his confession. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he sighed. I was hoping you'd stay out of this. So was I. The first gunshot shattered the canyon. A bullet slammed into the rock beside Ethan's shoulder, exploding stone into the air. The boy screamed. Horses reared violently. Aiyana threw herself toward the child. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed both of them and dove behind a massive sandstone boulder as another volley ripped through the narrow pass. Stone splintered. Dust erupted. Echoes rolled through the canyon like thunder trapped between mountains. Pinned beneath a rain of bullets, Ethan pressed one hand over the leather pouch the boy still refused to release. For the first time, he noticed something hidden beneath the cracked flap. The edge of an old folded map, drawn by hand, marked with symbols identical to those carved into Aiyana's turquoise pendant. And in that single heartbeat, Ethan realized the pouch was never carrying treasure. It was carrying the only path to something men were willing to start a war to possess. Bullets chewed through the sandstone with sharp, angry cracks. Dust burst into the air, filling Ethan's lungs with the bitter taste of rock and powder. The boy curled against the canyon wall, both arms wrapped around the leather pouch as though letting go would be worse than dying. Aiyana crawled beside him despite the blood soaking through her side. "Keep your head down," Ethan said. Neither of them answered. Outside the boulder, Mercer shouted over the echoes. "You've got nowhere to go, Walker." Another shot slammed into the stone. Fragments sprayed across Ethan's coat. He remained perfectly still. Panic got men killed. Silence kept them alive. He carefully unfolded the corner of the weathered map hidden inside the pouch. Only enough to glimpse it. The paper was old, far older than anything carried by wandering traders. Thin lines crossed mountains and rivers with remarkable precision. Near the center sat a circle drawn in faded red ink. Around it, the same symbols carved into Aiyana's turquoise pendant. The map was incomplete. The lower half had been torn away years before. Someone had wanted no single person to possess the whole secret. Ethan folded it again. Whatever this place was, it had already cost lives. He heard movement beside him. The little boy was watching. His dark eyes carried fear, but also suspicion. "You looked." "I did. Will you steal it?" Ethan met the child's gaze. "If I wanted to steal it." He gently pushed the pouch back against the boy's chest. "I wouldn't have given it back." For the first time, the child hesitated. His small fingers loosened ever so slightly. "My name is Nantan," he whispered. Ethan nodded. "I'm glad to meet you." A faint smile almost appeared. Almost. Then another rifle shot shattered the moment. Mercer's voice echoed again. "I'll count to 10. No one replied. After that, his words drifted through the canyon with unsettling calm. "Every rock in this place gets blasted apart." Aiyana slowly leaned against the sandstone. Her breathing had become shallow. She looked toward Ethan. "There isn't much time." "What is the map?" She closed her eyes briefly. "It isn't a treasure." "I figured. It leads to Peace Spring." Ethan frowned. "I've never heard of it." "Very few have." She swallowed painfully before continuing. "Long before soldiers came west, before railroads, before forts, leaders from many tribes met there. The place is sacred?" She nodded. "It belongs to no tribe, no chief, no army." Only then did Ethan begin to understand. If a place like that truly existed, whoever controlled it could unite tribes, or divide them forever. Nantan reached into the pouch again. This time he removed something Ethan hadn't noticed before. A tiny wooden carving. An eagle. One wing had broken away years earlier. "My father made this." The boy's voice trembled. He said. His eyes filled, but no tears came. "If I ever reached Peace Spring, people would finally stop killing each other." Ethan stared at the little carving. It wasn't polished. It wasn't valuable. It had been shaped by imperfect hands with a simple knife. Yet somehow, it carried more weight than gold. Outside, Mercer laughed. 5. His men began spreading oil along the dry brush near the canyon entrance. Ethan smelled it before he saw it. Lamp oil. His expression darkened. "They're going to burn us out." Aiyana struggled to sit upright. "There is another way." She pointed deeper into the darkness. A narrow passage. So narrow horses can't follow. But people can. Ethan looked toward the black opening disappearing beneath the cliffs. It seemed impossible. A crack in the mountain more than a trail. Mercer's voice thundered again. 3. One of the riders struck a match. The tiny flame glowed bright against the gathering night. Ethan slipped the turquoise pendant into his pocket, lifted Nantan into his arms, then offered his free hand to Aiyana. She accepted it without hesitation. Not because she trusted a cowboy, because there was no one else left to trust. Behind them, the first flames began crawling through the dry desert brush. Ahead of them, the mountain opened into darkness so complete it seemed capable of swallowing every secret ever buried beneath the frontier. Darkness swallowed them almost immediately. The narrow passage was barely wide enough for a single man. Jagged stone scraped Ethan's shoulders as he carried Nantan through the twisting crack beneath the mountain. Behind him, Aiyana leaned against the wall with every few steps, her breathing uneven, her boots leaving faint drops of blood on the ancient rock. Then came the fire. A deep roar echoed behind them. The flames Mercer had set rushed into the canyon entrance, feeding on dry brush and desert wind. Orange light flickered through the cracks in the stone, throwing strange shadows across the tunnel. The mountain groaned. Dust drifted from the ceiling. "We have to keep moving," Ethan said. Aiyana nodded. "There are old paths beneath these cliffs." "You've been here before?" "Only once." She paused to catch her breath. "My grandfather brought me when I was a little girl." Nantan looked at her. He said no outsider would ever find it. Aiyana managed a tired smile. "He didn't know I'd meet one." For the first time since the shooting began, Ethan almost smiled back. Almost. The passage curved sharply before opening into a hidden chamber deep beneath the desert. A narrow spring trickled from the rock, its clear water gathering in a shallow pool before disappearing into the darkness again. The air felt cool, clean. It smelled of damp stone instead of smoke. Ethan lowered Nantan beside the water. "Drink slowly." The boy obeyed without a word. Aiyana knelt beside the spring, washing the blood from her wounded side. The water around her fingers turned pink. Ethan crouched nearby. "Let me see." She hesitated, then quietly untied the torn leather around her waist. The bullet had only grazed her ribs. Painful, but not fatal. Ethan tore a clean strip from the inside of his own shirt. Years ago, Sarah had taught him how to dress wounds after long cattle drives. Funny what a man remembered. His hands worked carefully, never hurried, never lingering longer than necessary. Aiyana watched him. "You've done this before." "My wife taught me." The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence settled between them. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He tied the bandage. "So am I." Nothing more needed saying. Across the chamber, Nantan sat with the little wooden eagle resting in his lap. He was staring at Ethan. "My father said white men always take." Ethan looked up. "And what do you think?" The boy considered the question. "You gave back the map." Another pause. "You carried me." Ethan shrugged. "You couldn't walk." Nantan slowly nodded, as though trying to fit those simple actions into everything he had been taught. Aiyana noticed it too. "Hatred is learned," she whispered. "So is trust." Before Ethan could answer, a faint sound drifted through the chamber. Metal. Very distant. Very soft. Clink. 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 He immediately stood. "Did you hear that?" Aiyana's expression changed. Her eyes widened. "No." She turned toward the darkness beyond the spring. "That's impossible." The sound came again. Rhythmic. Like chains striking stone. Not close, but growing closer. Nantan clutched the wooden eagle. "My grandfather told stories." "What stories?" Ethan asked. "The guardians." Aiyana slowly rose despite the pain. "There are no guardians." "There were." She looked toward the tunnel ahead. "They disappeared many years ago." Another metallic echo rolled through the hidden passage, this time louder, followed by something else. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Not the hurried steps of men chasing prey. The deliberate pace of someone who already knew exactly where they were going. Ethan quietly rested one hand on the grip of his revolver. It was the first time he had touched the weapon since the shooting began. A shadow appeared at the far end of the chamber. Tall. Motionless. Wrapped in a long buffalo hide cloak faded by countless seasons. Then a deep, weathered voice emerged from the darkness. "You carry the map." The figure stepped into the pale light of the spring. "But the map has not yet decided whether it will carry you." The old man did not stop until he stood beside the spring. The buffalo hide cloak hanging from his shoulders carried decades of dust. Gray braids rested against his chest, bound with faded strips of red cloth. Deep lines marked his weathered face, not with bitterness, but with patience earned one season at a time. Around his neck hung a necklace of carved stones. One of them was turquoise, exactly like Aiyana's pendant. She inhaled sharply. "Elder Chaska." The old man inclined his head. "I wondered if any of your family still remembered the path." Nantan stared in amazement. "My grandfather said you died." A faint smile appeared beneath the old man's silver beard. "Many people have believed that." His eyes slowly shifted toward Ethan. "And yet a white cowboy stands where no outsider has stood for nearly 50 years. Ethan remained silent. The old man stepped closer. So, he extended one wrinkled hand. The map. Without hesitation, Nantan looked at Ethan. Not Aiyana. Not Chaska. Ethan understood the silent question. For the first time since this journey had begun, the child was asking someone else to decide. Ethan slowly knelt beside him. The choice is yours. Nantan looked down at the leather pouch. My father said never to let anyone take it. Has anyone tried to earn it? The boy thought for a long moment. Then, with careful hands, he removed the folded map and placed it into Elder Chaska's palm. The old man did not even unfold it. Instead, he folded Nantan's small fingers back over it. It was never mine. His voice echoed softly through the chamber. It never belonged to one person. He turned toward Ethan. Do you know why men are hunting this child? They think the map leads to power. Chaska slowly nodded. They are wrong. Silence settled once again. The map leads to responsibility. He walked toward the spring, tracing his fingers across the flowing water. Peace Spring cannot be owned. It can only be protected. Aiyana lowered her eyes. My father believed every tribe should guard it together. And many feared that idea. Chaska sighed. Fear has always been easier than trust. Before another word could be spoken, a distant explosion shook the cavern. Dust rained from the ceiling. The hidden chamber trembled. Mercer. He was blasting his way through the mountain. Another boom followed. Closer. The old man's face remained calm. He found the outer passage. Ethan instinctively reached for his revolver. How long? Not long. Nantan looked frightened again. What do we do? Chaska turned toward the deepest part of the cavern. There, hidden behind a curtain of falling water, stood a massive stone doorway covered with ancient carvings. Ethan immediately recognized them. The same symbols from the pendant. The same symbols from the map. The old man placed one hand against the cold stone. It has waited for generations. He looked directly at Ethan. It will not open because you carry a weapon. Then at Aiyana. It will not open because you are Apache. Finally, his eyes rested on Nantan. It will open only when three people who have every reason to distrust one another choose the same path. No one spoke. Outside the hidden chamber came another thunderous blast. The mountain shook harder this time. Cracks crept across the stone ceiling. Small rocks splashed into the spring. Mercer's men were getting closer. Chaska stepped away from the doorway. The decision must be made now. Ethan looked at Aiyana. She looked at Nantan. The little boy slowly reached out his hand. Not toward the elder, toward Ethan. Without a word, the cowboy accepted it. Aiyana placed her hand over both of theirs. The instant their hands touched, a deep rumble rolled through the mountain. Not from dynamite. From the stone door itself. Ancient gears hidden for generations awakened beneath the earth. And somewhere beyond that slowly opening doorway lay the truth that countless men had mistaken for treasure, but was, in reality, the last hope of keeping the frontier from tearing itself apart. The stone door opened with the sound of centuries awakening. Cold air drifted from the chamber beyond, carrying the scent of clean water, cedar, and earth untouched by war. The trembling beneath their feet slowly faded until only the steady dripping of the spring remained. Then the explosions came again, much closer. A crack raced across the wall behind them. Elder Chaska did not turn. They have found the entrance. Ethan looked into the chamber beyond the stone door. There was no treasure, no gold, no weapons. Moonlight poured through a natural opening high above, illuminating a broad circle of ancient standing stones. At the center, a spring flowed into a crystal pool, its surface so still it reflected the sky like polished glass. Around the circle stood weathered staffs, each carved with the marks of a different nation. Apache, Navajo, Hopi, Cheyenne, Comanche, and others Ethan could not name. No throne, no crown, only empty places where leaders had once stood together. This, Ethan whispered, is Peace Spring. Chaska nodded. Long before the frontier learned to divide men by color, this place reminded them they all drank the same water. The words had barely settled when the outer wall exploded. Stone shattered. Smoke rushed into the sacred chamber. Mercer stepped through the dust with 6 armed men behind him, his face lit with triumph. So it was real. His eyes swept across the chamber. He laughed. I've spent 20 years chasing this map. One of his men frowned. Where's the treasure? Mercer's smile disappeared. There doesn't have to be treasure. He looked toward the spring. If every tribe believes this place belongs to all of them. His voice became colder. Then whoever controls it controls every treaty. Silence answered him. For the first time, Ethan understood. Mercer had never wanted gold. He wanted division. Destroy Peace Spring, and every tribe would blame another. War would follow. Fear was always profitable. Mercer slowly raised his revolver. Move aside, Walker. No. You'll die? Maybe. Mercer sighed. I never hated Indians. His gaze shifted toward Aiyana. I simply learned men pay well when they're afraid of each other. No one answered. Because everyone knew he was telling the truth. Mercer stepped toward the spring. If nobody can own it. He pulled a stick of dynamite from his satchel. Then nobody will. Nanton gasped. Aiyana instinctively moved forward. Ethan caught her arm. No. She stared at him. He'll destroy everything. I know. Ethan slowly removed his revolver from its holster. Mercer's men immediately aimed their rifles. Instead of raising the weapon, Ethan opened the cylinder. One by one, the bullets dropped onto the stone floor. Clink, clink, clink. Every eye followed them. Then Ethan placed the empty revolver at his feet. The chamber became perfectly still. Mercer blinked. Have you lost your mind? Ethan looked directly at him. If I shoot you. He glanced toward Nantan. The boy learns peace is protected by killing. His eyes returned to Mercer. If you shoot me. He nodded toward the spring. Everyone here learns exactly who you are. For the first time since entering the chamber, Mercer hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. But everyone saw it. Fear. Not of dying. Of standing alone. One of his own riders slowly lowered his rifle. Another looked away. A third quietly stepped back from the dynamite. Mercer noticed. What are you doing? Nobody answered. Outside, more footsteps echoed through the broken tunnel. Not bounty hunters. Apache warriors. Then riders from another tribe. Then another. Drawn by the explosions. Drawn by the sacred place. Within moments, dozens of armed men surrounded the chamber. No one fired. They all looked at Ethan. The unarmed cowboy standing between hatred and the last chance for peace. And for the first time in his life, Silas Mercer realized that a man could lose everything, without a single shot being fired. No one remembered who lowered a weapon first. Perhaps it was one of Mercer's riders. Perhaps it was a young Apache warrior standing beside the broken entrance. Or perhaps it was simply the silence itself that made every rifle suddenly feel too heavy to carry. One after another, steel disappeared. The sacred chamber echoed with the soft sound of rifles resting against stone instead of shoulders. Silas Mercer looked around in disbelief. You fools. His voice cracked with anger. They'll kill each other the moment you leave. Nobody answered. For the first time in years, no one believed him. Mercer's fingers tightened around the revolver, then loosened again. He realized what had happened. Fear had stopped listening to him. Slowly, he let the weapon fall onto the ground. The sound was strangely small. Two Apache warriors stepped forward. Elder Chaska quietly raised one weathered hand. No. They stopped immediately. He will answer for what he has done. The old man's voice remained calm. But not here. Mercer expected chains. Instead, the warriors simply stepped aside. No one touched him. No one struck him. For a man who had spent his life believing power came from violence, mercy became the heaviest punishment of all. Without another word, he walked out of the chamber alone. No one ever saw him return to the frontier. The spring continued flowing as though none of it had happened. Its clear water reflected every face gathered around it. White, Apache, Navajo, Cheyenne, old enemies, future allies. Each reflection disappeared the moment another ripple crossed the surface. Elder Chaska looked toward Nantan. The map. The boy carefully unfolded it one final time. Instead of giving it away, he carried it to the edge of the spring. He looked at Ethan. What should I do? The cowboy smiled faintly. It was the first real smile to reach his eyes in many years. What does your father tell you? Nantan looked at the water. Then, without hesitation, he released the map. The old paper drifted gently onto the spring. Ink slowly dissolved. Ancient lines faded. The symbols disappeared one by one until nothing remained except clear water flowing toward the future. No one tried to stop him. Some places were never meant to be found, only remembered. 3 years later, travelers crossing that part of the Arizona territory often spoke of a lonely ranch where strangers were never turned away. The fences were simple, the barn weathered, the coffee always hot. Some visitors wore broad cowboy hats. Others arrived wrapped in woven blankets bearing tribal patterns. Nobody seemed surprised to find both sharing the same table. On quiet evenings, children could be seen racing across the open pasture. One of them carried a small wooden eagle with a missing wing. Another wore a turquoise pendant hanging from a leather cord. Near the corral stood Ethan Walker, repairing an old saddle beneath the fading sun. The deep lines on his face remained, but the loneliness had quietly disappeared. Hoofbeats echoed across the prairie. He looked up. Aiyana rode through the golden grass on a chestnut mare, the wind lifting strands of black hair beneath the western sky. She stopped beside the fence. Neither of them spoke. Words had never been the strongest part of what they shared. She reached into her saddlebag and removed a small object wrapped in soft buckskin. It was the little wooden eagle. Its broken wing had been carefully carved anew. The repair was visible, not hidden. She handed it to Ethan. "In our people," she said quietly, "we do not erase what was broken." He turned the carving over in his hands. The new wood did not match the old. It was lighter, stronger, beautiful because it had once been damaged. Ethan looked toward the horizon where the last sunlight settled over the endless plains. Cowboys, Apache families, children laughing together. No treaties were signed that day. No speeches were remembered. History would never record the name of Peace Spring. But the people who drank from it carried its lesson wherever they rode. Aiyana gently rested one hand on the ranch gate. Ethan stood beside her. Neither reached for the other. Neither needed to. Far beyond the hills, a lonely harmonica drifted with the evening wind as the first stars appeared above the frontier. Out here, peace had never belonged to the strongest man. It belonged to the one who found the courage to trust someone who had every reason not to trust him. And sometimes, the greatest thing an Apache girl could ever offer a cowboy was never a treasure, a promise, or even love. It was the chance to become the kind of man who no longer needed to carry a gun to change the world.